Melanie Paizis-Jones is a production designer who has worked on several films, including Whiplash, The Curse of La Llorona, Bill and Ted Face the Music, and The Dirt, as well as several TV shows, including Corporate, Bless This Mess, and Single Parents. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today, Melanie.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, all right. So the first question I have is, how did you get into production design?
Um, I started when I was 11 years old. I started dancing,
Mm,
and then I started doing theater. I did a lot of community theater and summer stock, and I did that for years, for 20 years basically. But in the meantime, it's the kind of theater where you might be in the show, but they also want you to contribute in some other way. And I could paint and draw well. So as through all those years I was doing that, I also would work on props, I would work on scenery, and it just segued into design. And I became a technical director of an equity waiver theater down here in Los Angeles. And at the same time, I started working on movies as a painter. And it just sort of evolved over, 10, 15 years. I worked from a painter, on-set dresser, set decorator, and finally as a production designer. And then I've been doing that solidly since around 2005.
got it. So it's kind of like a natural flow.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
So while you're doing that work, both maybe earlier on as well, when you were dancing, when you were getting into painting and set dressing, and then including now as a production designer, what would you say are some of your inspirations while you're doing that work?
Um, Artistically, you mean in just in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah,
like
and artistically or like any sort of inspiration that you have and that you find while you're
well,
creating.
I mean, the first thing I have to say is the people around me. I did theater with a group of people, many who have ended up on Broadway now. It was just one of those, particularly in the Equity Waiver Theater that I worked at, which was called the Golden Theater. It was just a group of young, talented, incredibly talented people, and we did, gosh, I think I did 5 or 6 seasons of shows with those people. It was just very magical. A tiny little theater, 20 by 20 stage, and I would hang the lights and run the lights and sometimes be in the shows and build the sets from, material that was donated. And so that was a very fun and inspirational time in my life. In terms of, um, you know, work that I had seen, like movies and things like that. I mean, I love movies. Okay, so the whole Planet of the Apes series. When I was a kid, they used to play those at the movie theater. You could go see all 5 movies in one day, and your parent would drop you off. You'd go in, and then in between the movie, open the theater door. Mom would pull up, and you'd go, "Come back, in 2 hours." And this is, so I love movies. I love TV. I was a kind of kid that if I watched TV and somebody was talking to me, I wouldn't respond to you. Um, I always liked, I think probably my favorite movie is a Vin Vendors movie called Wings of Desire, which was made in the early 90s, which is kind of esoteric and very beautiful. Foreign language film. But I definitely like films like 12 Monkeys, which is a Terry Gilliam movie in Brazil. Um, and God, so many more. I mean, I love it all. I'm not. I consume as much as I can, and I'm not, like I was just telling you with my work. I don't only choose to work in one genre. I don't only watch one genre. I just watch, what comes across my path and seems interesting. I dive into it. So yeah.
Yeah, very cool. So obviously that kind of love of film did bring you into the film industry. So what was it like trying to enter the film industry, having that theater background as a theater designer? And how would you say that your theatrical background helped to prepare you for entering the film industry?
Oh, it was invaluable. The theatrical background is invaluable, not only directly to this kind of work, I think, but everything in life. Um, to answer the first part of the question, it was a person that I had done theater with he, I grew up in Santa Cruz, the Monterey Bay area. And in the late 80s, I was already down here in LA. I wasn't working in movies yet. I was working at the theater. This friend that I had done theater with found out that they were doing a movie in Santa Cruz. And so he found out where they were shooting, and he went and he said, I'm a local, I want to work on this movie. What can I do? And he happened to look like Kiefer Sutherland, who is an actor. This movie was The Lost Boys. And they said, hey, you look like our star, you can be his stand-in. And so he did that job, and he made all these connections with the people on that movie. And then he moved down to Los Angeles, and I was connected to him through theater. He was connected to them through Lost Boys. And by way of that, he called me one day and said, I'm working on this film and they need a painter. Do you want to come paint? And I think a theater experience, I'd never painted for movies. But one thing theater teaches you is to jump on an opportunity. And I said yes. And so I went, and a professional scenic artist kind of trained me how to do, aging a wall, making a place look old, or, just all these different techniques, and stayed on the movie for about a week and then left. And I painted for the rest of the film. It was very small, low budget. I don't even remember the name. But that's it. And his connection made me connections, and those connections made me other connections. Every job that you do, you're basically meeting people who you may end up working with later. They may refer you, or they rehire you. So that's how that happened.
Wow, so just kind of like having all those connections and meeting all these people.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very helpful. We've heard a lot about that from other guests as well.
Yeah.
It's all about connections. Yeah. So you've obviously moved from theater into film. What would you say is the biggest difference between designing for theater and designing for the screen?
I think in the general way that movies are different than theater. It may be similar in the way that you would approach acting, where in a film, depending on the genre, it might be a little bit more realistic looking, because you see everything and it's 360, which is definitely different. You're not in a proscenium. You're in a camera can shoot anywhere, up, down, to the sides. There's no wings. Unless you set it up like, we're only going to see this way. This is all you have to dress. And that happens sometimes, having to do with expediency, or, because, you're moving around all day. There's lots to do. So maybe they go, when we go into this bedroom set, we're not going to see everything. We're just going to see this corner. So, but 9 times out of 10, you dress the whole thing. And maybe they shoot it, maybe they do, they might only shoot one direction, but they decide that when they're in there. There's a definitely a process of, for a director and a director of photography, of coming into your set and kind of getting a feel of it and seeing where the light's coming from. And then they make choices on the day of what they're going to shoot, but you have to present the whole thing. So I think in that way, it's probably more realistic, genre dependent. It's definitely a lot more stuff, unless your stage set is going to be the same way through the whole show. You're not moving parts and pieces in and out. It's really everything in that room, everything in that place is going to be there. So the volume and the amount of stuff and the amount of detail can be a lot more intricate than it is with theater, and more likely more realistic.
Yeah. So over the past couple weeks, we've just finished our set design unit. We've been talking a lot about set design. So what would you say is your design process? Do you think it like differs from other people? How do you go about designing something new?
Well, yeah, I think everybody definitely has a different approach. Because I came from theater, and this is maybe one of the ways that would be different from a lot of production designers come from design school or they come from art school. So their emphasis is on really on the aesthetic, and obviously taught to tie the aesthetic to the story. I mean, we're telling, we are responsible for the visual aspect of this storytelling based on this script, right? But because I'm a theater kid, I actually do story first. So my process, you know, when I'm reading a script, I generally see it as I'm reading it, you know, just like you do when, obviously, when you're reading a book or whatever. And so I see those sets and I pretty much see what I see right away. And the first aspect that comes out for me in terms of the aesthetic is usually color. What is the color mood of this scene or this character or the whole piece overall? So I'll start with that. And, you know, then normally I'm reading a script, I don't have the job. So it's because I'm going to get an interview for this job. So then I build a web page and I pull research images and I just create a lookbook. This is what I saw when I read that script. And it's a lot of images, usually hundreds, and I put them together, and that will often be, if I get the job, that'll often be kind of the go-to for the overall visual. You know, then once you get the job, then you're breaking down how much of this are we going to build on a stage, because it's an environment that we need to control, and how much of it is going to be a location. And when you get the job right away, you start with what they call a location scout, and you're going out and you're looking at, you know, Brody's house. What does that look like? And we'll see multiple options, all narrow them down. And then you take the director and the director of photography to look at them, and everybody kind of collectively decides what's the best, you know, what's the best place for us to shoot. In the meantime, you're also designing the sets that you're going to have to build. And, you know, it's crazy. There's a lot to do. When you're a production designer on a film, it's a very busy job.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of location shooting, I'm a set designer for our school, and I'm used to only designing for the one location and everything, and I have complete control over what's on the stage. How is it shooting in a location where you don't have that control?
You know, you try and negotiate as much control up front with the person who owns the house or the building or the business where you're shooting. Luckily, I don't have to do those negotiations. The location manager does. So I talk to them about what I think our needs are. Like, we want to paint, you know, that's one of the more common things that happens is, we love this house. You know, the director, everybody, we love this house just the way it is. Just make it a completely different color and look entirely different than what it looks like. So, you know, there's a lot of painting that goes on. The furniture goes away, new furniture comes in. Yeah, you may not use a location if the person isn't willing to make those adjustments. I mean, we always put it back the way we found it. So it's a lot of work to shoot in a location. It's not often that you go in and shoot it just the way it is. Once in a while, that will be the case. You know, and then the lack of control issue comes down, really, I think in some ways affects the actual shooting itself than it really does the art department or set decorating. You know, because there's noise issues and all those other things. But again, those things they're managed by the professionals, the location manager and the location department, and you know, they're a godsend, because, you know, it's a lot of work just getting it looking right.
Yeah. So speaking of the other people that are involved in the show, how would you say that you're designing for doing production design? How does that kind of differ with and also work with the designing other aspects of the show?
You mean like how is it different from what the
You know, like,
DP or the costume
yeah,
designer? Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Um, well, we come first because we're really creating the world, right? I think of each movie, each show as a new world. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you're gonna, you decide you're gonna play castle or you're gonna play, house or whatever. You're completely creating this world. And the production design is the basis for that, for the world that everybody steps into. So the actors step into this world, the director of photography steps into this world, even to a degree the director does. Like and it's a collaborative process, of course. I'm talking to those people about what they want and what they see. And, it's not only up to me. I have to come to a job with an idea of what the world should look like. But quite often it will modify and change, because there's a lot of there's a lot of people to serve in terms of there's the writers, there's the director, there's also the producers who can weigh in on it too. Um, so it's substantial. Others come in then once we've created that world and they use it and they focus on aspects of it. They enhance it, lighting. Do you do lighting while you're also?
I don't do lighting, but Bianca does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that has a profound effect on what we do. It can alter color, it alters mood, knowing, I talked to the director of photography and the gaffer who's responsible for the lighting, a lot before we start shooting. And how do you think you're going to approach this? What kind of lighting are you going to use? What kind of, is this for instance, on this show that we did now, we all decided that the living room of the woman's house is going to be very dark, and we painted it, and many of us liked the color, and in the end we had to repaint it because it was too dark. And
Oh,
part of that was an issue, just for film, just for lighting, just for being able to, it's going to suck all the light out, no matter how much light they put on the wall, it was going to end up being too dark. So yeah.
got it. Yeah. So of all the jobs that you've done, what would you say is like your favorite one? And can you kind of delve in a little bit into why that one kind of stood out to you?
Well, the funnest one I did was The Dirt, and it was because I made New Orleans look like Los Angeles. So you're talking about creating a world. And it's not even, you're not there. Often you're someplace else, making it look like someplace else, just like you do, with a blank stage. It's the same thing. You go to a city and, the reason we picked, I didn't pick New Orleans, but the reason New Orleans was picked was because, a tax incentive. Money is usually a motivator for a lot of the stuff we do. We have to remember with film and television, it's a business. And that is the first consideration always, before the artistic aspect of it. So that was the most fun. I think Whiplash was probably still, it was the most challenging, and well regarded of all of the work, and a really incredible job to be on. Damien Chazelle, went on to win the Academy Award for La La Land, and he's an exceptional person to work with. But that was supposed to be New York City. We shot in Los Angeles. My theater background weighed into that in an enormous way. We shot that film in 17 days, which is an incredibly short, right? Eyebrows
All of
raised.
Whiplash?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was Whiplash. It was literally I think they went to New York and they shot one extra day in New York City that I did not go. They were just grabbing some of the, some exteriors. So to make Los Angeles looked like New York, and so you're going to go downtown. They shoot downtown Los Angeles as many cities and New York often. So I knew that was possible. But the way that the style of the school, we wanted it to look like it was Midtown Manhattan. And so I figured built around, sometime between 1900 and 1920. And we ended shooting. I also knew I didn't want to make them move. It was more than one location a day and a tight shooting schedule. And if you have to, when you shoot, you've got 15 trucks filled with, lighting and grip equipment and set dressing, and the catering truck, and production has a truck, and there's a camera truck, and there's all the big massive trucks. And every time you move, literally physically have to go from one location to the next. You got to load back up, and the Teamsters drive the trucks over there, and then you have to unload, and it just eats up precious time. So we all decided that we needed to try and find some place that we could stay for, at least a week and a half. Or 2 weeks of that very short shoot. And we ended up at the Palace Theater downtown and used parts and pieces for that theater. I just redressed the lobby and made it look like a jazz club. And then I redressed another part of the lobby and made it look like a movie theater. And upstairs we did the band room, that you see at the opening. There's a big loft, beautiful loft up there, and I built the long hallway, which is the first shot. And his rehearsal space was down in the basement, and so we really used everywhere in that theater. And the one place that we couldn't find, and we went to multiple other theaters downtown and other buildings and businesses to try and find Fletcher's band room, so the dark wood room, once he gets moved up to the higher level band. His lower level band was this beautiful place with windows and light, and Fletcher's kind of, J.K. Simmons' character is kind of this menacing, so I wanted it to dark wood, and design the sound panels on the ceiling. I wanted it to feel menacing almost. And we couldn't find it. And we were standing on the stage of the Palace Theater talking about all the different locations we were going to shoot in. I was looking at the theater floor, and anytime I go into a theater, I just fall in love. I love the theater more than anything. I love the physical space of a theater. And I was looking at the floor, and I was just admiring how beautiful and old this wooden floor was. And I thought, well, why don't I build the set on the stage of this theater, and then we don't have to move anywhere. And I pitched it, and they really loved the idea. I mean, the cost of building that set probably saved money from moving. It's, again, when you're driving all those trucks and you get another location, you have to pay a location fee, and the Teamsters are expensive, the drivers and all that. So I designed that set, and we built it right on that stage. And I even think they used the fly gallery to hang some of the lights and stuff up above. So
Nice.
yeah.
So it was like going back to your roots. That's kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so great. It was so much fun.
So a little bit more about some of the other jobs that you've had. For like specifically Bill and Ted.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's the third in a series. How was it joining the team for the third movie and having to kind of play off of the designs of the other two while also crafting your own feel of it?
It was fine. When I interviewed for it, I read the script and I interviewed for it. Part of the thing that was easier for us is that so much time had passed, and they really wanted to show Bill and Ted as middle-aged guys. So in a way, visually, you're picking up at a new place. And at the beginning of that film, I kept fairly drab, color-wise, because they're not super happy. you know, their lives are a little mundane and they're not doing so great and they're not the big success that they thought they were going to be, and this, that, and the other, right? And they're old. And you know, everybody was on the same page with that. And then as it goes along, and you know, they're time traveling again, and you know, their daughters are meeting people, that, you know, then the fun starts. And particularly in hell, the concept of the mid-century mansion that Death lives in was mine. I brought it to the project. I thought it would be really funny that he was trying to be kind of, you know, cool. There's a really iconic house in Hollywood. It's a mid-century that's up in the Hollywood Hills, and it gets shot a lot. So I based it on that. It's like build it into the side of a cliff, and you have this big vista of hell, and you know, it's kind of like a midlife crisis house in a way, you know, because he was sad too. So the process was really easy. I've worked with Alex Winter on other projects before, and he's the person who introduced me to the you know, again, here's connections. Suggested that the producer and the director meet me, and then I got the job. And yeah, it was fun, and you know, we all saw the same thing, so it was pretty seamless, really.
Yeah, nice. So as a designer, what would you say is the most important quality to have?
Flexibility. Absolutely. You need to understand, you know, you need to come to a job with a point of view. Like I said, I read a script, I see the set, then I'll draw the set, or I'll pull references, whatever. This is my idea, but it's always it's a jumping off point. It isn't an absolute. And particularly with film and television, there's so many other people who get to have input. You know, I'm the head of my department. I control my department. It's kind of like being a general, and I have lieutenant generals under me, the set decorator, the, you know, construction coordinator, the prop master, these people. And, you know, I say, hey, do it this way, or, you know, how do, you know, I'm very collaborative. My process is very collaborative, but I'm only a 2-star general. The director is a 3 or 4-star general, as is the director of photography. And then there's the producer, who's probably a 5-star general. So, you know, there's times when you are just really sure that this idea, that this color, that this wallpaper, that bedspread, or, you know, this location is the best for this character. And somebody's like, no, I'm not feeling that. I really want it to be more this, more that. And you got to roll with it. You have to be able to switch gears. So over the years, I've learned to kind of have a plan B and C already. So I don't just come to a project with one concept. I usually have alternates, because things could change. And you start to understand that you start to be able to anticipate the kinds of things that people might decide is they would want more of, like this, you know. So you go, this would be a fancier version of this concept, and this would be a little bit more, you know, a different direction, but have it ready to go, and be flexible, be willing to change directions, because it's going to happen for sure.
So thankfully there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but how has the pandemic changed what you've been doing and all the work that you've done, and how are you able to work through the challenges that it presented?
You know, I'm working for Netflix right now, and their process, I wear a mask. I'm sitting at a desk behind a plastic shield. I have a tracking device. It's pretty intense. With that, you just, you know, human beings, one of the greatest, I think, qualities that we have is that we're very adaptable. And it really hasn't changed much of anything, except for the fact that I have to wear a mask when I'm outside of my office, my personal office, all the time, which sometimes sucks, but you know.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah.
So my last question before we pass it over to the audience, do you have any final advice or anything that you would like to give to anyone who wants to become a designer?
I think the most important qualities that you can have as a designer are flexibility and perseverance, and being willing to do other jobs that, particularly in film and TV, that may not be the top job. I'm a better designer because I was an on-set dresser. An on-set dresser is a person who is hired really to represent the designer in the art department and stand next to camera and move things around when the camera moves and listen to the DP and the director and what they're talking about, what they want to see. I got a really good education in the difference between what a production designer does, which is everything, and what the camera sees and what's important in that. So that was one benefit. Be willing to take the smaller jobs and learn the craft. I mean, there's so much to learn with film and TV. You never know it all. You learn something new on every job almost daily. So that's where the flexibility comes in, and then the perseverance, because it's tough. It can get tiring, sometimes frustrating. And you just, if you want to do it, you have to put that in front of pretty much everything. Ego, your ideas, and just stick with it.
Wow. All right. Thank you so much. I will now pass it over to Bianca. And Bianca, you have some questions from the audience, right?
Yes. And again, if anyone has any questions, you can put it in the chat or just send it to me if you're shy. So the first one is, what's your opinion on film school as a means to enter the film industry? And this is coming from someone who wants to be like a screenwriter / producer.
I think it's a good way to go. There's a lot of people that I work with, and particularly writers, directors, and even there are more production designers going to film school, mainly because you make connections. It's, there's some fundamental academic things that you learn about writing that I think are probably very important and essential. I did not go to film school, so I can't speak to that from experience, but half the people that are in the industry did. The other half didn't. But most of the writers and most of the directors did go to film school. So I think it's valuable for those positions. Yeah.
So next is, what was the set that was the most fun to design and then build, either a whole world or a specific room?
Probably Hell from Bill and Ted. Because you get to, like, what does hell look like? My hell didn't look like, they went to hell, I think, in Bill and Ted 2. And again, so much time had passed. None of us felt like that we had to, outside of the characters of Bill and Ted and death, that we had to be married to that look. And that movie came out in the late 80s, and their hell was really wacky. It was like all gray, and it was lit with red light. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted hell, particularly because their daughters were there. Much like I was talking about how Fletcher's room in Whiplash, and I wanted this menacing feel. I wanted, and that darkness does that, right? You can't see everything. And I get this, I take this from horror movies. I wanted our hell to be a little bit more menacing and more dramatic. So I was like, I want it to be black. I want all the rock to be black. So those hell rocks, I mean, that literally came from sketches that I did, pictures of lava, pictures of rocks on Mars, sculpture that people, in putting it all together, and then having they're made from foam. So I had a sculptor carve all of that stuff, or multiple sculptors, but I had a key sculptor that I worked with, and figuring out what textures they would be like, where they did these ones that were like kind of almost looked like shingles, and somebody made a mistake and they cut a real deep groove into it. I'm like, oh, that's incredible. Do that, do more of that. So it was just really, it was literally like being a kid making sandcastles or something, but you're building hell. And then what color black? No, black is not just black. Like, what black are we pick? There's 10 blacks. Which black are we going to pick? And then doing a camera test and having the DP light it, and it was just great. And then figuring out how to do the lava. We cut grooves in, and the lighting guy would come in with these kind of flex tubes and shove them deep into the groove, and then turn it red, and it was just fun. It was so fun.
Nice. So do you think you can get into the film industry successfully without as much networking, or like without as much experience or majoring in theater?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, like I said, about half the people that I've worked with were film school people. The other half there's a lot of musicians in art department, that didn't make it in the, make a top 40 record or whatever, and they end up in the art department. There's a lot of people that do other stuff, and just kind of met someone. And it's not networking, like the networking isn't necessary. I knew one person. My friend Ricky Floyd was a stand-in in the movie Lost Boys. And that's how my career began, because he knew me from theater. There's a lot of nepotism, lots of brothers, sisters, cousins, or neighbors, friend of a friend ends up in the film industry. And, people come from all sorts of different construction, everywhere. So you need to know the right person or people, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be high up in the pecking order. It could be somebody who's working as a production assistant who hears that somebody needs a production assistant, and you go and do that job. And I literally started working in 1987, and I have not stopped, pretty much.
Nice. So if you're doing like a more historical film, how does the era of the setting affect or change your process?
I do a ton of research for everything. If you're doing a period piece, you definitely need to do a lot of research and make sure that the things that you're bringing to set are appropriate and not after that time period. And it's great now there's the internet, and you can get a lot done with the internet. In the old days, we used to have a place called the Warner Brothers library, and we have the Art Directors Guild. They have a lot of books, and you can go there and say, I'm looking for 1920s courtroom or whatever, and they'll pull stuff for you. It's research. But every movie I do, even if it's contemporary, is a period piece to me, because again, we're world building, and you're doing a snapshot in time. So, and it's usually the past. Sometimes it's the future. When I did the Purge, we did that in 2012, and I think it was supposed to be 2020 or something like that, right? So, and here's an interesting use of that. So we thought, well, that's not that far ahead. It was like 2020 or 2022. What can I do? How can I assume what it's going to look like? And it's not the far future, so it's not going to be too outrageous. So I picked Art Deco, because that's a style that keeps on coming back. You can see Deco in the 40s, you can see Deco in the 60s, you see Deco in the 1980s. And so the house, the furniture in their main house, I don't even remember the family's name or the actor, but anyway, their house was very Deco influenced. And that's something that you can do too, is you think about how period influences reemerge and reemerge and reemerge. And in that case, I just kind of did the math and thought, well, maybe at around 2020, maybe Deco will start becoming popular again in some way. So we'll see. We got a whole decade to maybe see if that's going to hit or not, if I was right.
Yeah. So this is okay. So what are your timelines like from being hired to the first day of filming? How long do you have to design and prepare?
So that varies, and it depends on what you're doing. So if it's a film, maybe you have, a bigger film, maybe you have 3 months to design the whole movie, maybe 4. Whiplash, I think it was 4 weeks. A commercial, it might be a week, but you're only shooting for a day or two, 2 weeks, maybe. So, really big movies, which I haven't done yet, can be many, many months, and then many, many months of shooting. For the project that I'm on right now, we're shooting 45 days, and I think we had 3 months prep.
Cool. I don't see any more questions in the chat. If anyone has something, put it in quickly. Oh wait. How many projects are you working on at one time about?
Well, you're really ideally only doing one because you're giving it your full focus, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes I do 2. As a production designer, what will happen is I usually start earlier than everybody. And when we're done shooting, I'm finished. Lots of other people on my crew do wrap it up. They do the wrap, and that can be weeks. But I don't do that. And I'm often looking for work. Like, we're done with this job in May, and I'm already interviewing for other stuff, so that I have work in the future, maybe sometime at the end of May or starting something in June. And, then I get a couple of weeks off. But often that overlaps. Like, I could have a job right now. I'm pretty much done designing the show. I'm just managing it. And I have my art director and other people who do a lot of that. So, 2, I've done 3 projects at once, but I don't recommend it. It's exhausting. It's not really a good idea.
Okay. So that's everything in the chat. Again, if you have a question, you can put it in real quick.
Yep. We'll hold on for just a sec and see if there's any other questions. All right. I am not seeing any. So, Melanie, thank you so much for coming to talk to us. It was really nice getting to meet you and hear about all the things that you've done.